and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is Irreverend, Faith and Current Affairs.
Welcome back to Irreverend, Faith and Current Affairs. We've been away, but now we're back in a new location for me, in the same location for Tom and Daniel, but I'm sure you're both equally excited to be back. Chaps in the virtual recording studio, welcome. Nice to see you both. How's it going? Let's come to you, Tom. How are you? You just bought a new clergy shirt, which looks exactly the same as your old one.
Meow. Sorry. Meow. We'll come to that later, won't we?
Is that some kind of verbal description of your appearance?
No, it's me identifying as a cat.
I see.
But not very enthusiastic. I wasn't sure which animal to do, to be honest. I probably sort of seek to discern my spirit animal, whatever kind of nonsense people do for this. How do they know? That's what I want to know. How do they know?
It's just a feeling, Tom. It's just a feeling.
It's a feeling. Okay.
It's just a feeling.
If they don't identify as a bird,
you know. If you know, you know.
Can you fly? That's my question.
I'm
really good. I went to see Peter Gabriel on Monday.
From Genesis.
From Genesis, yeah. Though he's had a longer career out of Genesis than in Genesis now. He's very good.
Right.
Great singer, really, really distinctive voice. Great showman.
What are his sort of famous songs that he's known for?
Well, Sledgehammer is probably the most famous one that you'll come across. Salisbury Hill in Bath.
I don't know.
Do you not know it? Oh, you should listen to Sledgehammer. You'd recognise it. Right. Definitely, you'd recognize. Daniel's nodding slightly. Have you heard of Sledgehammer? Yeah.
Have you?
It's like a classic.
I know more like Phil Collins stuff, like Susu Studio.
Well, I mean, Phil Collins probably was sort of. I was playing that to my wife, and she said to me, "It sounds quite like Phil Collins." I was like, "You did know they were in the same band?" And she's like, yeah. "Oh no, I didn't know that." But
I knew that. I mean,
you knew that.
That's why I brought up the comparison.
So I think it's a valid comparison to me. I think Phil Collins is a bit poppy. Anyway, he's a fantastic musician. His whole band were actually. But the spectacle of a Peter Gabriel concert is part of why you go there, and it really was a spectacle. The artwork, he did collaborations with different modern artists, and they were all high quality, some really innovative use of projectors and screens. All in all, I really enjoyed it. We were in the O2 and we got upgraded. We're just hanging around outside. We were going to be up in the upper circle. If you know the O2, it's obviously a vast arena. I don't know how many people it holds, tens of thousands. And we were going to be up at the back at the top. And we were just because we didn't manage to get seats next to each other. Me and my parents were hanging around with my aunt. And this lady comes up and said, "Would you like to upgrade?" And we said, "Yeah, okay." And so she gave us 4 new tickets next to each other, down about 25 meters away from the stage, and it was just amazing.
Wow!
Were you wearing your glorious blue shirt?
I was wearing my other one. It was I got straight from a funeral. So I was in clericals.
Really? You were wearing a clerical shirt?
Well, minus the. I thought I'd take my collar off because it's a bit warm. So I was in a blue clerical shirt.
Nice, very nice, Tom. Well done. Well, you were being a witness for Christ. So at that Peter Gabriel concert. So well done. And Daniel, good to see you. Everything okay over in sunny Salcombe?
Yeah, my daughter's just finished her last GCSE. So end of school uniform. That's a new era coming in. Hopefully sixth form. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. So you're celebrating with some ice cream or some jelly or pizza?
Ice cream and coffee.
She's probably a bit old for jelly.
Do you know, I had jelly the other day.
Jelly,
I had jelly when it was the first thing I was allowed to eat after my operation a fortnight ago. 3 weeks ago now. And so I said that I wasn't allowed hot food. And I said, do you have any jelly? And they said yes. And along came a load of NHS strawberry flavoured jelly, which was actually very nice.
I'm sure it was. Oh, very good. Well, listen, chaps, we've got loads to talk about today. I just want to do a little notice about our church search, which if anyone doesn't know, it's on our website, reverendpod.com. And basically the idea is we've got a map of the UK. It's actually of the whole world, but most of the churches are in the UK, although you can put them for other countries as well. Anyway, the point is it's like a kind of positive TripAdvisor for churches. That's the way I put it, because people often get in touch with us and say, we'd love to go to church. I'd love to find a church, but I don't know where to go. And obviously we don't know all the churches in the country. So what we're doing is we're getting you to go on that page on our website, reverendpod.com, click on Church Finder and fill out the form that's there if you've got a church which you'd like to recommend. And the question that you answer is something like, what would listeners to Irreverend enjoy about this church or love about this church? And that's the question you've got to answer. And then eventually that form will be sent to us and we'll get it put up on the map. The problem is I've obviously been, well, not obviously, you might not know, I've been moving house over the past week. So I've fallen a bit behind and we've had quite a lot of people send them in, which is great. So just to let you know, there are more going up. And it's just going to take a little bit of time to get them all there. If you've put one on, if you've sent a form, I mean, there's no problem. Don't worry. It will just take time to get that up there. So please don't worry about that. But the church search is there. You can use it and you can send in forms. And yeah, hopefully that will be really helpful. By the way, if anyone does use that and successfully connects with the church, please do let us know, because it'd be great to hear that it's actually achieving its purpose. irreverendpod@gmail.com if you'd like to do that. So yeah, that's about the church search updates. But anyway, that's that. I don't have any more notices, and I think we've got so much to talk about. We should probably get straight into the old scripture, which I believe, Tom, you're going to help us with today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
we should do the Lord's Prayer, shouldn't we?
We should. Daniel to lead it.
Yeah, why don't you do the Lord's Prayer? You do scripture.
Absolutely. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
What's the scripture reference?
It's well done for listening, Daniel. Deuteronomy 18, 15 to 22. So this is from the Revised Standard Version.
Oh, yes. Good version.
The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brethren. In him you shall heed. Just as you desired of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly when you said, let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, or see this great fire any more, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, they have rightly said all that they have spoken. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brethren, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. And whoever will not give heed to my words, which he shall speak in my name, I myself will require it of him. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that same prophet shall die. And if you say in your heart, how may we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You need not be afraid of him.
Very nice.
Yeah.
A great passage there. Do we understand that, that first bit there, is that a prophecy of Jesus, is it, at the beginning, when it talks about, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers?
Well, that's one obvious one you could make. I think it's Moses speaking. It should be said. It's not clear from that passage. I'm never quite sure whether to put in a sort of Moses said at the beginning or not. But anyway, there are other prophets, there weren't there? So other people like Moses, never quite reaching his heights. But I guess Joshua is another prophet like Moses. David, King David. But yeah, I think in the end, Jesus is prophet, priest, and savior, isn't he? So
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think the reason we wanted to do this is kind of as a slightly fun one, because our world is filled with false prophets today, people who predict the future, but who predict it inaccurately. So what does it say here? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word that the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You need not be afraid of him. So I think, go on,
yeah,
Tom.
we first spoke about it. Jeremy reminded me, we first spoke about it very early on in Irreverend. I think in passing about probably Chris Whitty or something, wasn't it? And their doom-laden presumptuous prophecies destroyed. But there's another person who has made other presumptuous prophecies, haven't they?
Yes, indeed. Well, we're coming up on 5 years since Greta Thunberg tweeted out the following. A top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. So this was 5 years ago, and we're all still alive.
Mind you, I arguably, you could say the prophecy hasn't necessarily been tested, has it?
In what way? What do you mean?
I mean, we haven't stopped using fossil fuels, and we could all die in the future due to it, I guess, arguably.
Yeah,
but
not
probably
over, not over the next 5 years when the 5 years have already elapsed. Apparently, she actually deleted this tweet back in March. So I can give you do you want to hear a bit of Tucker Carlson talking about that back then? Let's have a listen, shall we?
COVID isn't the only big project they have in mind for us, a project the experts will justify on MSNBC. And indeed, it's not. There is the climate change agenda. And the climate change agenda is the single most ambitious effort to remake human civilization in all recorded history. And it's coming. In fact, it's already in progress. The only reason that millions and millions of Americans aren't protesting in the streets tonight over this effort to completely overturn their lives is that on some level, many people still do trust the experts, at least on climate change. But should they? We were pondering that this morning when we saw that the world's most famous climate change expert, Greta Thunberg of Sweden, just deleted a tweet she wrote in June of 2018. Here it is.
I think he means that somewhat ironically. This is back before he was kicked out by Fox, by the way. So June 2018.
Well, I do. I mean, I think it's possibly arguable that you could read the tweet as saying, unless we stop in the next 5 years, humanity at some point in the future will be wiped out. But yeah, I mean, there'd be plenty of quotes, haven't there? I mean, why in the next 5 years? I mean, it's complete nonsense, and obviously won't come true.
Yeah. But let's just listen to it. It's a short clip, almost over.
Quote. Okay. A top climate scientist is warning that climate change will wipe out all of humanity unless we stop using fossil fuels over the next 5 years. Scientist, of course, was a Harvard professor, so obviously that prediction was going to be correct. But here we are, still driving our Silverados and still alive, and some of us are still happy. So it does make you wonder if Greta Thunberg, the greatly revered Greta Thunberg, a perennial finalist for the Nobel Peace Prize, could have gotten that so wrong. What else have the climate experts gotten wrong? And how long have they been getting it wrong?
That's a good question, isn't it? Yeah, I know what you mean, Tom, but I think to my mind, the tweet reads that she's saying that in 5 years, humanity will be wiped out unless we stop using fossil fuels. I'm sure I think that's clearly what that tweet means. She doesn't mean, the damage will be irreversible unless we using it over the next 5 years.
It's also complete nonsense because I mean, if the humanity had literally stopped using fossil fuels, all fossil fuels within that 5 years, I mean, probably 2/3 of humanity would be dead now anyway.
Yeah,
so there'd be just the economy would have collapsed to the point we wouldn't be able to feed, we wouldn't be able to heat, we wouldn't be able to do anything. The world would be a funeral pyre, and it would have achieved nothing.
Yeah, I was reading Laura Dodsworth's new book, which she wrote with I think he was I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think he's some kind of behavioral science expert called Patrick Fagan, and she and he were. That's two people, by the way, not somebody with some kind of split identity. She and he were
two-spirit.
Yeah, two-spirit. She and he were saying that this is actually like a technique, a manipulative technique that the media and politicians use, whereby they seed an idea by actually denying it. So they'll come out and they'll say, I guess this isn't exactly the same thing, or maybe it is. It's like seeding an idea by saying something inaccurate. Let's say it like that. So they'll come out and they'll say, well, we completely deny this, or they'll make a kind of false prophecy, but they'll use that in order to then take the further step and to actually implement something, or to do the thing that they said they weren't going to do. So the example she gave was, you remember when Nadeem Zahawi I think it was when he was the vaccines minister. He came out and said there will not be any vaccine passports. We're not going to introduce any vaccine passports, and we're definitely not going to do it. And then, some short time later, he said, well, it would be absolutely irresponsible if we didn't introduce vaccine passports. So anyway, I thought it was a really interesting example of the way that somebody comes out and says, we absolutely deny something in order to plant the idea in your head, and then later on to then say, well, we are going to do this. So it's almost like just by hearing the idea, even in the context of a denial, it actually sort of softens people up and makes them ready for it. And
with the vaccine passport was, if you looked at the government website before he'd made that first statement, there was actually procurements already going on for the software.
Really?
Yeah. They found, and civil servants working on it. So
they did that. So it really does seem that was a behavioural science manipulative technique, or I don't know really what you'd call it,
or just a lie.
A lie. But why would you do that? I mean, unless you were following. And Laura's obviously written a lot about the nudge unit and everything like that in government. So they know what they're doing, don't they? When they do things like this, presumably these things were quite calculated. But anyway, so the way it relates to this kind of somewhat obliquely is that we've always had these kind of prophecies of, well, the world's about to end unless X, Y, and Z happens, unless we stop using fossil fuels. Another thing Laura writes about is this softening us up for eating bugs and insects and things like that. So we have to start doing all of these things. And if we don't, the world is going to end. And of course, the world doesn't end and humanity doesn't die out. But at the same time, it's always seeding these ideas in our minds, like we must stop using fossil fuels. We must cut these things down, even though the prophecies continue to fail time and time again. And I do think there is a sort of, we chose this passage somewhat facetiously, didn't we? But there is a serious application here, which is that, when people do make prophecies which fail time and time again, whether that's because they're lying or because they're making inaccurate predictions in a very confident way, it does imply that these people are not trustworthy and that we should stop trusting them. I know that sounds sort of obvious, but people find that really, really hard to do. And these things persist and continue to have a hold over us. So I do think the application of this passage applies to the modern world as well. If people say things and they don't come true, these words have been spoken presumptuously, and you don't need to be afraid of this prophet because it's a false prophet. So I don't know what you guys think of that. That's just the way I think about this passage.
I agree. I tend to say that we shouldn't there's a sort of temptation to split off kind of scientific sounding prophecies with to sort of religious sounding ones, but there's no reason to make that category distinction, is there? Because in the end, all of these sort of scientific prophecies, which are based on modelling, are essentially just a reflection of belief, in a sense. When you look at all of the, for example, all the models, and this is very clear even from the IPCC, that they're all running hot. They're all making predictions that haven't yet come true. There's no models that have accurately predicted, for example, the current temperature as measured by satellite temperature, which is very accurate. Sort of has ceased to increase for the last 20 odd years. It's not in there. They can't predict it. They're all wrong. They've all been failed over and over again. I don't know quite why people keep listening to them, other than it's now become ingrained.
And you only have to have a little knowledge of modelling to see that modelling is an incredibly inaccurate science, and that you can end up with millions of models coming out of a data set. There are probably billions of models on some bell curve, and of course it's quite easy just to pick the one that suits the politique of the time.
Well, they do that. They pick the worst one, don't they? They pick the IP6 or whatever it is, the one with the maximum amount of heating in there, and produce all their press releases based around that. Was actually the actual scientific publications are far more hesitant about the whole thing, and and it's quite shameless in a way. This is what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I do recommend this book, Free Your Mind, when it comes out. So it's really good. I haven't read the whole thing yet, but I think it's.
I got a copy from HarperCollins a couple of weeks ago, and I've read it with a view to doing a review. And it's very good. It's compelling reading, actually.
Yeah. I think it's
um,
actually a great thing to give to people who are, sort of more trusting of the media and the government, to just open people's eyes to how manipulative these organs often are, and the fact that they have these established techniques of manipulation and frankly brainwashing, which are well established, and there's so much evidence that these things are thought through and intentional, and that they're used just over and over again. There are sort of countless examples of them. So just another sort of slightly humorous story, or sort of weird climate story, which I just wanted to discuss before we get into something more serious, is this weird climate choir that was at Bristol Cathedral. Did either of you see this? Now, I honestly, I don't, because I've been moving, I haven't been really able to follow this, but all I've seen is this tweet from Climate Choir saying Bristol Climate Choir joins XR, which is Extinction Rebellion, at Bristol Cathedral today for Luke Jerram's Oil Foundation event. And what I can see, I won't share the video because I'm a bit wary of my new internet setup. We've already had a couple of problems recording already, so I might just play some of the audio. But what I can see is a bunch of people. They're doing a procession, and at the front there's a bunch of people dressed in these kind of weird red. They're sort of full length body dresses with headdresses, kind of look like sort of paper mache. And then the people have got painted faces. The faces are white, so red sort of blood red clothes, white faces, and sort of black mascara and red lipstick. It kind of looks like blood. It looks like they're sort of bleeding. And they're going around and they're doing this. They've got their hands out as well. Now there are people dressed in Extinction Rebellion t-shirts going around. You might be able to. You can probably hear the lyrics a bit better in this next. We can't tell our children that we have not tried. I won't let them see that I shall be alone for our waste. No gods anymore. I won't let the trees green and tall be cut down for profit. I won't watch them fall. I won't let the trees green and tall. I won't let them be cut down for profit. I won't watch them fall. So you kind of get the idea of what's going on. What do either of you know anything about this story? I've literally just seen this tweet.
I believe it's not it wasn't a liturgical event per se, but a kind of art installation type thing.
Right.
I might be wrong there. It's not like it's something that's interrupted evensong.
But I mean, I wouldn't be that.
It's very of the type, isn't it, for sort of the way that a lot of Bristol culture is going and heading, and it seems like that particular cathedral has a panache for promoting these sort of progressive woke causes and using all those sort of tropes. I mean, I thought what struck me is if you look at the wider congregation, in inverted commas, around that, this is not an enormous amount of people, and it does look a bit like a Lib Dem conference
with some weird red blood red.
Yeah, with Emperor Palpatine's Praetorian Guard.
It's quite normal for Liberal Democrat conferences. The cathedrals seem to have this incredible ability to to not think things through. I mean, I suspect actually it's been thought through far too much. Basically, they attract a kind of secular mind view for some reason in the most beautiful and sacred of spaces. And I mean, at least this wasn't in a cathedral in an evensong. I mean, I was shocked to discover that the Cathedral of Chichester has a LGBT pride evensong coming up, and you think, well, you know, it's just you know, that's not their job, is it? It's not the cathedral's job to do that, because it's just going to ostracize. I'm going to send the dean a letter at some point.
I hope they've included the Two-Spirit people.
I'm sure they did. Well, it was all the pluses. It was LGBTQI plus. So, you know, everyone who possibly identifies under that umbrella. So I'm sure all of the sadomasochists are really pleased that they had their own evensong at Chichester Cathedral, and it just irritates you, because it's there as a, you know, it's a place of worship, isn't it? And it's just been desecrated by secularism. And even though that was,
you know, do we want the banner above all our cathedrals? We welcome everybody as long as you gift aid.
Wow, and even it's a sort of purported art installation with the chanting as a sort of pseudo religiousness and a pseudo liturgy around it. It's pretty dreadful, isn't it?
The images are awful. These people who are dressed up. I mean, it looks kind of satanic, to be honest with you. It looks like something out of the Satanism. The Satanism gathering that we covered a few weeks ago. I couldn't think of what to call it. I'm not sure what happened. What is it when Satanists get together? Is it like it's not a service, is it?
Coven, surely.
A coven. It kind of reminded me of that Satanistic coven that was covered so positively by the BBC in our episode.
They've been up to it again. I don't know if you saw I saw on a news article of this BBC promoting witchhood or witch sort of pagan spells as part of well-being.
Right. Okay.
But you know, you sort of don't blink an eyelid these days, do you?
Oh, it's just part of the course.
I think what I particularly find despairing is the idea that there is someone, say, in the cathedral establishment, as in much of the machinery of the Church of England, who thinks, oh, this is going to really attract and be magnetic to, you know, all those people that don't come to church, that we're doing this in a sense as a marketing ploy, as a way to kind of get down with the activists, that this is going to make us look more youthful and trendy and what have you, and in fact it does completely the opposite. I don't think anyone gives a damn really what they might about what the church believes about the climate, to be honest.
Certainly like these sort of churches that have fully embraced sort of climate activism don't seem to be, you know, filling their pews with climate activists. It's just they just seem to be the same sort of congregation they had before, but just a little bit maybe a little bit less devotional, a little bit less sort of focused on God.
Yeah,
it'll be honestly about 20-30 earnest people, you know, of retired age, and one or two students who have dragged themselves to church, whereas the rest have probably thought that the church is, you know, so heteronormative, patriarchal, and awful that it's a toxic brand.
Yep.
While putting off that, you know, the people who listen to this show, who no doubt love to go to cathedral services or go to their cathedral to pray, but are actually in large numbers repelled by this.
Yep.
But you know, try. There's a certain kind of apparatchik in the church who just doesn't want to know this.
Didn't you have
you could depressingly, you could sit them down and show them all the stats, and say, do you appreciate how this is a real turn off? And they'll just, you know, write you off as alt-right or something.
Yeah. Tom, what were you going to say? Sorry.
I don't know. I hear something about you having a bit of a what to with the Bristol precentor or something, Daniel?
Yeah, I think it was the canon missioner, really, and just comment about petroleum and, you know, the usual stuff. That if I've read this right, and to be honest, I'm trying to blank it out of my brain at the moment. But
it was on Twitter, wasn't it, Daniel? Just
that he was saying that he would not platform anybody who had alternate views to his own on climate alarmism. They were these binaries that you were either for his view or you were a complete, utter denier, despicable, deplorable so-and-so, and there should be no room for any contradiction.
Yeah, I've got it here, Daniel. I'll read it out, shall I? Why do news programs even put on climate deniers? At the recent climate panel at Bristol Cathedral, accompanying Luke Jerram's Oil Foundation, I refuse to invite climate change deniers on, as they are anti-science, anti-fact propagandists who distract from taking real action. So that's what he said. So
it's Michael Crichton, isn't it? The author of sort of Jurassic Park and various other sort of soft science fiction-y kind of historical novels. They're quite fun. Who said that when this sort of language is used around science, is no longer science. It's not. It's him who's desecrating the idea of asking questions. Now, I mean, and you end up with this sort of groupthink that's led us where we are, where the sort of idea that of alarmism is the idea that alarmism is the predominant view of scientists, which it isn't. It's not. It's a contested territory. And to be honest, I mean, that's where I'm quite happiest to fight this slightly rearguard action on the climate. Is that yes, it changes. Climate has always changed, but do we need to be alarmed by this? And do we need to uproot the entirety of Western economics and destroy what we've built in order to survive something that's not agreed on?
I think it's become apparent in the last few years that there's a whole swathe of people who'd rather like from their comfortable ivory towers to socially re-engineer the world. And the rest of us are collateral damage to that.
Yeah, I mean, you tried to make that point to him, didn't you? And then he replied in a very passive-aggressive way, "No, brother, because as Christians, we would advocate a societal-wide approach based on the values of the Beatitudes, the Magnificat, and God's kingdom, rather than the values of the marketplace Jesus threw out of his father's house. But you are a priest, so you get that, right, Daniel? You're a priest, so you must get what he's saying, because that is the truth as far as Christianity is concerned. So you either get that because you're a priest, or you're sincerely, or severely, I should say, deluded and mistaken." I just read that and I thought, I just can't be bothered with this. It's just such a load of low resolution pseudo theological nonsense. I mean,
it's word salad, isn't it? I mean,
what does it mean? A societal wide approach. So you basically said to him, what if these policies damage people because they, for example, take away their ability to heat their homes in the winter? And rather than actually answering a question, he's written, we would advocate, we're a very royal we, a societal wide approach. So what does that
mean?
And that is based on the values of the Beatitudes, the Magnificat, and God's kingdom. They're quite broad, isn't it? That's quite a broad kind of spectrum of,
it's not an answer, is it? I mean,
and passages from scripture he's decided to back up his eco advocacy.
I suddenly feel threatened by vicar.
And then there's this thing about Jesus turning over the tables being a kind of a sort of assault on the values of the marketplace, which is just clearly nonsense. It has nothing to do with why Jesus turned over the tables. It's because the house of God was being used for inappropriate purpose, which you could say is more relevant to what he's doing.
Only that.
And the values of the marketplace, just one further point, Tom. The values of the marketplace, many people say, are derived from the Mosaic law anyway. So, the idea of having a free market with fair measures and all this kind of stuff actually comes from our Judeo-Christian heritage. So this tweet is a load of nonsense. I mean, it sounds kind of, superficially impressive, but it's absolute nonsense. Sorry, Tom, carry on.
I was going to say that they do tend to rather entirely pick and choose and proof text dreadfully the sort of climate theologians that I come across. I remember one that we were made to go on a climate weekend with my curacy, we went to Hillfield, where the Franciscans have a base, and I remember the sort of the person who was responsible for climate. We had someone from La Rocha who do a lot of work in the climate stuff. No, not La Rocha. I don't know. La Rocha. I don't know. There's some sort of Christian charity that they don't make chocolates.
I was thinking of Lindor. Sorry.
They hector churches, and they got a gold scheme. You can go, are you a gold church, Jamie? No, you have to find out about these things.
No.
Bronze. Who knows? Anyway, the point is that they're sort of talking about theology, which is a great thing to do, and started pointing to Romans 8 and the world groaning and saying, well, this is climate change. I said, no, it's not. It's not. That's quite clearly Paul's talking in the narrative of a new creation. I mean, it's quite clearly the whole of Romans is a sort of commentary on Genesis, and to take that idea that the world is groaning because of climate change and needs release through human activity is to completely misread Romans to the point of making it incoherent. And at which point,
about the fall, isn't it? Romans 8. It's about God subjecting to the world to futility, and that's clearly talking about the sin of Adam. It's got nothing to do with climate change.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's what I say. Romans is a sort of, I mean, you could read it in some ways as a commentary on Genesis, and it's not about climate change. Let's just say it. Paul was not writing about climate change. It's taking a sort of apocalyptic and eschatological passages and it's just applying them blankly to whatever you like is bad.
It's terrible, isn't it, Tom? This is a kind of Christian version of the sort of manipulation we were talking about earlier. When people, we've covered this quite a lot on the show, haven't we? When we've had the Archbishop of Canterbury doing that. I think it was the passage in 2 Peter 3, the bit about the world being destroyed and all this kind of stuff. When people use scripture in this way, it's disingenuous. It's you proof texting scripture in order to bolster some kind of political point, and people shouldn't do that. You read the text to understand what the text says, and then you can apply it. You don't, you're getting it completely the wrong way around when you do it like that.
But that distinction between deduction and induction is largely lost, isn't it? And I think when you have more authoritarian schemes going around, this is what happens. Jordan Peterson just did a podcast with an academic who decided some years ago to make up papers of woke word salad and see how outrageous.
Was that Peter Boghossian?
Yeah, and it was hilarious to listen to. And they put them forward, and after a while, he began to realize exactly what kind of structure and text would get a publication, and he now reckons he has 100% success in putting these out. So on the back of that, I tried to do some ChatGPT fake papers on anything. Any old drivel. I think I got one on the hermeneutic of tea cozies as part of a sort of as part of a transsexual narrative, and another one on the positioning on pews as a sort of gender patriarchy in the Church of England as a PhD proposal. And do you know what?
I bet that would get you that. This probably would have been written.
Yeah, this crap came up on the screen. I thought, flipping heck, this is the sort of nonsense.
Don't tell
the people. If you go onto a university website and look up, say on a theology department, and just look up at what people are actually proposing for doctoral thesis. It doesn't sound that different, sadly. Well, tea cozies are quite normative.
There was that wonderful one they made you attend at Cuddeston, isn't there, Jamie? Something about reducing the binaries or the binaries between. What was it?
It was something about shattering the binary between motherhood and non-motherhood. I think. No, wait, it was disrupting the binary between motherhood and non-motherhood.
And
what does it mean? Surely you're either mother or you're not. I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine.
But there are people working on this sort of stuff already. So, basically what you're telling me there, Daniel, is that ChatGPT is about to put most liberal theological faculties out of business because it could produce the same sort of word salad. I bet it could.
All humanities. Yeah. So, Daniel, are you going to submit any of these proposals?
Well, you should.
Yeah, I should do, shouldn't I? Yeah.
You see, all you need to do is go and check the references. So you need to, because they tend to make up references, doesn't it? Chaps, as I understand it. So you make plausible sounding references.
Yeah.
If you replace those with actual books, you'll get it through.
So what was it? The post-colonial, patriarchal.
Oh, so I'm just looking it up. Bear me a sec.
Use.
Pews as a go on.
There was one, the intersectional dialectic of the tea cozy. I'll read this. Unveiling cultural heteronormative appropriation from Gnostic, mythological, and critical theoretical lens.
It's there. I bet it's already. I mean, do you think that as we speak,
I'm smelling a first.
As we speak, Church of England primary schools are encouraging their children to take up the identity of a tea cozy, Daniel. So yeah,
and the other one was a doctoral research proposing the intricate discourse surrounding the place of pews as a form of discriminative seating in Anglican churches, while adopting a critical theory approach enriched by the transgender reading.
That's a good one as well, actually. I mean, it sounds so interesting, Daniel. I want to pay for it.
I want to hear. I want to read it. Yeah.
I want to do one on hassocks. I think combine it all together.
Post-colonial positioning of hassocks. I don't know.
Yeah.
Post-colonial shape of hassocks. Why rectangles must go. Someone he'd said that this academic that Jordan Peterson was talking to had said that they'd done one on, or seen one on, satellite mapping as a form of violence towards Gaia, because it was a sort of, she was being revealed in a way that she's not meant to be revealed from a distance. And this was a form of patriarchy. It was a form of penetration where these satellites were taking pictures of the earth in her nakedness. Yeah. And penetrating it.
Yeah.
Penetrating it with its, I see that.
Can you believe someone actually gets a grant for that?
It's amazing.
I can believe it. I can.
Sorry, Tom, come on.
We're on the wrong business, really, aren't we? We should just all take up new identities as liberal theologians and get grant money for writing nonsense. You could rather than actually, striving for truth or justice or anything like that.
Or just striving to live in the real world. I think that's. I've heard Toby Young use his phrase, which I think is quite good. I've heard him use it a few times recently. The reality-based community. I think that's quite a good phrase.
Is James Denning-Poll a part of that or not?
No, well, Toby Young would say no, but James would obviously apply the same critique to Toby. So that's up to listeners of London Calling to decide, isn't it? And while we're talking about this kind of nonsense, shall we actually talk about this? There are some very serious stories to talk about later, but seeing as we're talking about this kind of thing, should we talk about this thing in this school in Rye College, which is at least associated with the Church of England? Tom, you were saying you're not sure it's actually a Church of England school.
I think it's very complicated. I think it's a non-Church of England school that has ended up subsumed into a academy trust that's run by the Church of England. Okay. But I don't know how possible that is, or why that would happen, or who let that happen, because it sounds like a ridiculous thing to have happen. Okay. But it's not. It's Rye is Rye Canterbury? I think it is.
Not sure. Is it Canterbury?
It's just across the border from us in East Sussex, where we're Chichester.
Tom, do you remember what I said the name of the trust is?
Yeah. I've got it here. Let me read this out. So the headline is pupil who questioned classmate identifying as a cat called despicable by teacher. So it says here, a Church of England school teacher told a pupil she was despicable after she refused to accept that her classmate identifies as a cat. The 13-year-old girl and her friend were reprimanded by their teacher at Rye College in East Sussex on Friday at the end of a Year 8 class on life education, in which they were told they can be who you want to be and and how you identify is up to you. The row, which is infuriating, Daniel's turned into a dog on our...
How did he do that?
Because he's becoming a dog. Okay. The row, which has infuriated parents, was allegedly sparked by one of them asking a fellow pupil, how can you identify as a cat when you're a girl? Their teacher told them they were being reported to a senior leader and were no longer welcome at the school, part of the Aquinas Trust, a Church of England network of 11 schools, if they continued to express the view that only boys and girls exist. So that's what Daniel was talking about earlier. They're part of the Aquinas Trust, obviously named after the great scholastic theologian and hyper-rationalist Thomas Aquinas. So a highly ironic name. Given what transpired. And you know what? The best thing about it is we have an audio recording of the whole exchange because some clever pupil recorded it and put it on TikTok.
Double gold star.
Absolutely. A+ if they still have those. Should we have a listen? Again, let's call this Twits on Twitter for this week because I think it can't be anything else. Just interrupt if you want me to stop and we can make some comments. Here we go.
I think it's all just... If you have a vagina, you're a girl. If you have a penis, you're a boy. Yeah.
But cisgender is not necessarily the way to be. You're talking about the fact that cisgender is the norm, that you identify with the gender of the sexual organs that you're born with or you're weird. That's basically what you're saying, which is really despicable.
Yeah, normally.
Hang on a second.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, yeah, but that's despicable. Yeah.
How can you? Yeah, you're just despicable for being cis. I'm not even going to say it. I refuse to say the word. You're despicable for being aligning your identity with your actual organs.
No, but it wasn't that. As they were saying that's just the way it is. You know, they said if you have a willy or a boy, and if you have a vagina or a girl.
Who would say something like that, Jamie?
That's despicable.
Despicable.
Right? That is outrageous opinion to have.
How? When it's
if I called my mum right now, my mum would be on my side.
If I called my mum, she'd say.
Well, that's very sad as well.
Yeah. So my mum would agree that that's very. Then the teacher says, "Well, that's very sad."
How is it?
Loads of people agree with that. There's only a small majority of people who actually think that.
And why do you think?
Just to say, I've listened to this before. The school children do really, really well. They're really, really good standing up to this. That's the one small slip they say. They say there's a small majority of people who think that. I think they mean it's a
minority
people. So it's a bit of a slip, but they're under a lot of pressure. So I think we can allow them that. I think that's the one misstep in this whole exchange.
We have so many problems in the world with homophobia.
Yeah, but
hang on a second. Stop there, Joey. Because homophobia is not the same as I mean, the teacher's presumably accusing them of transphobia.
What's the link between denying that boys are born with willies and girls are born with vaginas and homophobia? Do you think? What's in her mind? Is it just all part of the same kind of non-traditional sexuality spectrum or something?
You've broken my orthodoxy, is what she's saying. So.
Yeah. It's a strange thing to accuse them of, isn't it? Because as you're saying, Tom, like the natural thing would be to accuse them of transphobia and say, well, don't you care about the way that
you hate trans people? Yeah. But of course, it's not what they're saying, is it?
No.
Yeah. I listened to this morning with my Czech friend who grew up in the Soviet regime, and he said, "This is what school's like."
Really?
Yeah, he said it gave him the shivers. So this is just what it was like.
Right, with different issues.
Yeah, different issues, but it was the saying that you're deplorable, that you should go to another school, and that your parents are awful.
Yeah. That's very insidious, isn't it? Saying that about their mother, your mother. It's very sad that your mother would say this. That complete, total lack of respect for the parent-child relationship, in that really undermining the authority of the parent, saying such a thing to the children at school. I've never heard any teacher say that. My whole time at school, I never heard a teacher say, "Well, your parents are wrong" or something like that. It's totally unprofessional, isn't it?
It's improper, isn't it? Because the parents at the end are the ones who the parents have primary responsibility for bringing up a child, and teachers should be aiding that.
Yeah, but I think that's what we're seeing, isn't it? We're seeing schools and the education system arrogate that responsibility to themselves and undermine the parents, and I think that is something that you're rightly saying was characteristic of the Soviet era, in communist Russia and Eastern Bloc countries, and in other totalitarian systems as well. It becomes about the state indoctrinating children and really removing the authority and responsibility of the parents.
Chaps, is it in the? I know it's in the Roman Rite for baptisms, where I just can't remember if it's in common worship, where it says that parents are the primary educators of their children.
Yeah,
your prime responsibility. It's in the sort of post-baptism spiel that you're supposed to give them, but no one does. I do.
But no one does.
I think what I like about the Roman rite in its baptismal liturgy is it has that right at the beginning, and it's a good one to have stated. And I always thought it was a powerful point that is made when parents present a child for the font. That you say that you have that primary responsibility. I've often heard it said by those who are very enthusiastic about the teaching trade, oh, we are the educators. You say, well, no, we're delegating some of that education to you, hopefully mostly on an academic basis. But we as parents are the primary educators of our children. And I find that extraordinary in a potentially Church of England school that that would be at the forefront, really, of any approach to teaching, and would certainly preclude slagging off a parent for saying a fairly normal opinion.
But there's that distinction that you've implied there, Daniel, between the academic and the kind of moral and, let's say, spiritual or religious. That distinction is being broken down, isn't it? Whereby now, this class was called life education. We did have that sort of thing when I was younger, like the PSHE lessons and all that kind of stuff. Whereas most people would want to maintain a distinction between the academic instruction of children and their kind of moral instruction. And maybe schools have always done a bit of that, but it seems to be that the schools are sort of increasingly wanting to see that as exclusively their domain, and to remove that entirely from the parents and the family and the home situation. I think that's the kind of insidious thing about it, isn't it? Should we listen to a bit more? We've got a bit more to listen to.
Gender. Yeah. I'm fine with lesbians and gay people. Same. I've got nothing against them. Yeah, same.
But gender there is a link between it, and you're saying that people can't change.
They just said they're fine with gay people. There's no problem as far as they're concerned. Then she's saying, well, there's a link between, believing in biological sex and homophobia.
They can't. They can't. Unless you get a penis attached. No, I'm not.
You're confusing sex and gender.
No, I'm not, though. Because if you have a vagina, you're a girl. If you have a penis, you're a boy. Yeah, you can't.
Just to go, they're doing the right thing, which is in a debate, like repeating the point over and over again until it's adequately addressed. If you have a penis, you're a boy. If you have a vagina, you're a girl. But she did say, you saw the kind of link there, didn't she? Because she was saying the link between your view and being homophobic is that people can't be whoever they want to be. So I think that's the link that she's drawing. So let's continue.
You can't have a vagina and be a girl, but
then unless you get surgery, and even then, because you've got those genes.
How you identify. It's not an opinion that we express in this school. Yes, it is. No, it's not. And if you don't like it, you need to go to a different school.
Right. Okay. Well, that's outrageous, isn't it? That's gone from being just simply a reprimand to being end of career as a teacher there.
Exactly.
You just she's just denied their right to express an opinion, which is actually protected by law, and to tell them to go to a different school is just outrageous.
And she's not a sort of head teacher or anything, is she? Not that it would be all right if she were, but she doesn't really have the authority, presumably, to tell them to expel them, from their viewpoint. This is not an opinion. The opinion, by the way, the thing that this all stemmed from is them saying that the classmate can't be a cat. And we've got another just extraordinary article which we're going to look at in a moment, but this is what sparked all this off. It's crazy.
I'm reporting you to Miss Willis. You need to have a proper educational conversation.
Hello, it's like the commissars, isn't it?
Yeah. A deprogramming session.
Yeah.
Clockwork Orange.
Going to send you to the Gulag Archipelago, to be to think for the next 50 years of your sins. Yeah.
Ministry of Love. Is it Ministry of Love that?
I think sometimes we need to think about the bravery and the courage of these children.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're great.
And
their intelligence as well. Just think on their
intelligence, bravery.
It's really hard to do that in front of a teacher who, just say, and she's so dismissive of them as well. And it makes me think of, do you know what makes me think of a contrast is actually our friend Bernard Randall and how he addressed this, question of, how can you, and the grace which we approached it. He said, you're free to believe that if you wish, you're free not to believe it if you wish. Of course, he got fired, accused of being a safeguarding risk. He's unable to minister, and has been, terribly supported. You can bet this will not happen to this teacher.
Yeah, no, she'll get away with it. A little bit more
about equality, diversity, and inclusion. Because I'm not having that expressed in my lesson. When I'm teaching you about you can be who you want to be, how you identify is up to you.
Everyone else thinks it. They just don't say it because then all this happens.
Maybe because they're polite and maybe they're sensitive.
I haven't said.
Maybe it's because they're intimidated, and because she creates an intellectually stultifying atmosphere in her classrooms, redolent of Soviet Russia. It might be something to do with that. Maybe
appalling.
All of the lessons I've been in, it's just because they turn around and start saying something. So I said, how can you identify as a cat when you're a girl?
Oh, well, they're now writing a statement. I would imagine that you'll be asked to write a statement as well.
We will.
Yeah, we will.
My mum will be fine with that.
They sound like really good kids, don't they? Listen to this last part. This is funny. See, what's going on? What's going on?
What the heck? I got that all on I got it on film, mate. I got it on film.
I'm just not going to go to life again.
She said, "I got it on."
Yeah, I'd write. Yeah.
And then the other one said, "I'm just not going to go to life, whatever it was. What was it called? Life. I've lost the page.
Life crap.
Life crap. Life education, I think it's called.
Yeah.
We
need some philanthropist to buy them a ticket to Disneyland each.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
they should get gold Duke of Edinburgh instantly.
Yeah, life education. They sound like really good kids, and she said, "Well, you'll have to write a statement." I said, "Well, we will," and it's like, "We'll tell our moms about this because
they'll be fine with it.
They've got nothing to hide." I mean, it's so ridiculous. Can I just read you some of this? So there are a number of articles about this that I've seen. This is on the Telegraph. So this says, "School that allowed child to identify as cat faces government investigation." It says, "School at the centre of a row over children identifying as animals is facing a government investigation. Teacher at Rye College was recorded telling pupil, blah, blah, blah." We just heard that. Gillian Keegan, who's the education secretary, is understood to have ordered an investigation into the CofE school. The Telegraph has revealed that at other schools, teachers are allowing children to identify as horses, dinosaurs, and even moons. Apparently, a source close to Mrs. Keegan said teachers should not be teaching contested ideology as fact. They must have due regard to safeguarding if a pupil identifies as an animal. And they're going to have an investigation. There was a really funny bit from Rishi Sunak's spokesman. Oh, yeah. On Tuesday, a spokesman for Rishi Sunak said children should not be taught contested opinions as fact. Well, that's what we've already heard. He said, "It's important parents and carers are reassured that children aren't being influenced by personal views of those teaching them. Any example that strays from this would be wrong, and we would expect head teachers to act." Nadeem Sahawi said, that's not a very good quote, actually. Nadeem Sahawi said, "It is clear," who is the former education secretary, by the way, "it is clear to everyone that schools need to stop the spread of this damaging nonsense. The government should make it clear to schools that they will be supported in standing up to the increasingly farcical examples that get in the way of teaching our children and preparing them for the real world." Priti Patel said, "We need a bit of take back control for parents," etc., etc. I thought there was a funnier part in this, but
I mean, there's this the ridiculous thing, okay, one child is being allowed to identify as a cat, which is absurd enough. Apparently, in another school, another child is being allowed to identify as the moon.
Yeah, with a moon. Wears a cape. Yeah, a moon. I think. I don't know if it's the moon.
It's a moon, so they're orbiting something.
When you think about it, it's quite sort of colonial, isn't it, of our moon to be called the moon when there are loads of moons.
Well, we have, I mean, strictly speaking, have multiple moons ourselves. Anything that's in orbit, but I mean, someone identifying as a moon and being allowed to. I mean, what
they're referred to as furries, apparently.
So these are people who pretend they're animals. Yeah,
children who self-identify as animals.
Well, I think furries usually has a sort of slightly grim sort of sexual element to it as well. I don't know whether that's happening, but they sort of dress up as they go to conferences dressed up as animals. But
they meow rather than answer a question in English.
Yeah.
An anonymous student says it's distracting us in the lesson.
I'm not surprised.
You can imagine some kids as well thinking, "Hey, let's have a laugh."
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, this is one of the comments I see quite regularly about this.
Oh, Tom, I found it. The child in question does not identify as the moon, but as a moon, and said they could put curses on people. These kids are just.
If you don't think I'm the moon, I'm going to curse you.
It's a sort of hyper individualism, isn't it? That's I am whatever I am in my head.
Yeah.
And cyberspace extenuates that even further. So I am my own metaverse.
Is it just it's a consequence of a loss of childhood, isn't it? I'm thinking of Lost Icons by Rowan Williams, which is one of the last sensible books he wrote, and his incredibly moving chapter on childhood, where he points out that we're losing the ability to let our children exist in make believe. And one of the effects of this is surely for them to stop understanding when they're in, because we're taking, a child pretends they're a boy pretends they're a girl. Oh, they're a girl then, and that's going to confuse them, isn't it? It's going to make them think, oh well, if I believe something to be true or make believe, then it's true, and it's just going to cause all sorts of chaos as they get older. And this is what we're seeing: people who literally cannot distinguish between make believe and reality. It's psychologically damaging, and there's a few people have pointed this out. The schools that are allowing this to happen are actually causing serious psychological problems to the children. It's safeguarding.
I can't say I'm particularly impressed by conservative ministers coming to the airways, clutching pearls and saying they're going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, you've had 13 years.
Yeah.
Well,
how is it that in a conservative government we've got to this position?
Yeah.
I find that extraordinary.
Because they've never been conservative.
I think the central kind of epistemological observation for me is that when you, in a sense, the teacher is following a logical pattern, isn't she? Because she's saying, well, if we allow people to identify as their preferred gender, then of course it makes sense to allow people to identify as their preferred species. So you can't draw a line. You can't draw a line there arbitrarily. You have to say people can be whatever they want to be. So I think that this is, we talked about Romans 1 a few weeks ago, didn't we? And I think it is more of the same kind of thing. It's like, well, people are just being given over to the immorality and irrationality and the delusion, the powerful delusion that they've fallen under. And this is just it's funny. I find it funny, obviously, reading this ridiculous stuff, but really Tory government has nothing to say about this, because the Tory government is not rooted in any kind of reality. It's not rooted in a theological or spiritual or anthropological reality, so it can't say anything. If you're going to say that people can seriously say that they're a different gender to their biological sex, which has no basis in factual reality, then why can't people be cats and moons? And these kids are doing a fantastic job of bringing out that contradiction and absolutely trolling this nonsense.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them no doubt are, but I think some of them probably are very ill. Well, or being allowed to become very ill.
Even worse, isn't it? I mean, if that's really, if these kids really do think they're cats. It's like that guy, that Canadian school teacher who came to school with those enormous fake breasts. Did you remember? And he said he was a woman. I mean, it was, and then it came out later that he was trolling them. But anyone could. I was thinking that I could do this. People would have to take you seriously. There'd be no choice. Even if you
before you knew it, Jamie, you'd be an archdeacon. You can come out as whatever you like.
Oh, I definitely won't do that. I definitely won't do that.
Well, they've got our first ever transgender archdeacon in the Church of England, haven't we? So
yeah.
Rachel Mann.
Rachel, yeah, it's a somewhat ironic surname, isn't it, really?
Did you see the prayers that they had written, and prayers, poems and things that they'd published?
Shall I get it up? Wasn't it some kind of was it like something to do with it was something in a liturgical setting, wasn't it? I can't remember what it was precisely.
There's one which seems to imply that the Virgin Mary was sort of annoyed or had second thoughts about receiving the Holy Spirit.
Really?
Yeah.
What was it? There was a one which started describe God as a chuckling woman.
Mm.
Do you remember? I'm trying to find it. I didn't actually make a note of it, but it'd be quite interesting for people. No, I can't find it now.
I always had an argument with this man on a thing about this, because I pointed out, and I still point it out as much as possible, that the sort of, if they're saying that there's distinctive difference in souls between male and female, that you can be the wrong soul or the wrong spirit in the body, then they're denying the universality of Christ on the cross, because the whole point is that he's a male, but that his spirit is human. He's a fully human, and that we all share in that spirit. He doesn't save cats on the cross because he's not a cat in any way, but he does save all of humanity because he's both, because the soul is androgynous. It doesn't express a sex.
Well, you could say the soul encompasses both sexes. Tom, not that I want to get sidetracked, but this is a reason you should be a philosophical realist and not a nominalist, by the way. But I'll leave that comment there. I found it. I found the prayer.
Go
on. Fantastic. I was looking for it too. I couldn't.
I've got it.
Go on.
Holy. So this is penned by the new.
Fire away. Oh, sorry. That's probably a patriarchal statement. Start. Begin.
Holy God, chuckling wise woman, tender and strange, we bless you. Bless us, trouble us, bewitch us into delight in your love, mercy, and grace. Christ, our sister, unite us in your holy bleeding. As you took spit and dust for healing, take our hands, cracked and huge as washerwomen's for God's work. Take our sacred bodies for the healing of the world. Birth spirit, that's the Holy Spirit, presumably. Birth spirit, as you coursed in intimacy through the veins of Eve and Adam, Hagar and Abraham, Deborah and Lapidoth, Naomi and Ruth, be the pulse of our lives, desire us with your desire. It's all very kind of sexual and menstrual, isn't it? I mean, it's
kind of weird putting Naomi and Ruth as yes, they were mother and sister-in-law, but they weren't lesbian lovers or in any sense married. I mean,
that what's sort of being implied there, do you think?
Yeah,
it's the sort of Californian bush therapy that you imagine Prince Harry going to, can't you? Some sort of Barbara Streisand figure floating around saying this, washing her auras over him as he pays £1,000 an hour to be cleansed.
Christ our sister, unite us. Look, I can understand like people trying to, say that God is not a man and that you can. I mean, you can't, but anyway. Saying Christ our sister. I mean, what exactly?
But it's exactly what again, this is sort of slightly inoculation presented by coming to Cuddeston. People don't realise that this is just what liberal theologians have been doing for months, for years. Do you remember Krista?
No,
Jamie, you don't remember Krista where they got a sex doll?
No,
called it Krista.
I don't think I was.
No, I avoided it, but I put it on a cross in our chapel.
What?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of thing is not that rare in theatre. I'm not.
Sorry, Daniel.
I'm not.
So they put a sex doll.
Yeah, in the
on
chapel.
A cross.
I mean,
to
be fair, Tom, it wasn't performing a sex act. Just that. And I'm not making an apology for it. The point I was making is that Christ.
Did a member of staff come back and say, "Oh, I'll take it back now"?
No, they probably gave them high marks for creativity, Daniel.
They said, "Send this person to a parish right now."
Yeah, send them to a Oxford College to be a chaplain. Yes, that's what they should do with them.
The world needs this ministry immediately. I feel like my point has been somewhat lost. But the point I'm making is that Christ can't be a sister because he was sort of unambiguously a man, so it's not appropriate to.
There's this idea, of course, queer theology would say that no, he wasn't. He was definitely trans, of course.
Yeah, we had that, didn't we, actually, in the Cambridge academic.
This is where Mary Harrington would say abstraction is violence.
Yeah.
Well, it's all quite violent.
It's violence to Christian theology.
Of course, yeah.
As the preface to Christmas says, in time, Christ became a man, born of a woman.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Let's move on to.
We should move on and talk about something else. So we talked about that. Oh yeah. So there was just that one other thing about this article in the Telegraph: Christians seen as aggressive in trans court case.
I can't quite work out what this chap's saying. Can you work out what he's saying?
So it's the Reverend.
Who is he again? He's somebody official.
Yeah, it's the Reverend Dr. Malcolm Brown, who's the Archbishop's advisor, and he said a bunch of stuff about Christian. So this refers to a case where what was the case?
So there's a teaching assistant shared Facebook posts that were critical of gender ideology on her Facebook, not about her own school, but about the school her children were attending, and saying that she didn't want those, which is a church movement school where the materials being used promoted transgenderism, which is unfortunately not entirely surprising. Should
we read out his statement and try and make?
Well, yeah. So she lost. So can I just say she lost her first employment tribunal because she went to the employment tribunal after she was sacked. But she's gone to the court. To appeal court, where the judge has said that was not the correct outcome because they didn't give proper due regard to her freedom of expression, basically. So yeah.
Yeah, sorry, Tom, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was trying to find the statement.
No.
Yeah, so he is the church's director of faith and public life. And he is some kind of advisor to the archbishops as well. So he writes, this is explaining why the church became involved, he said, and I think this kind of sounds like it was produced by ChatGPT, to be honest. Is it GPT or GBT? It's P, isn't it?
PT.
Yeah. Over many years, cases which pitch Christians with particular views against people who find those views offensive have been fought between binary positions with little nuance. That's a bit of a strange statement because he seems to set it up in a kind of binary position with little nuance and then describe it as such. It's kind of tautological, I should say. On the one hand, the representatives of Christians claiming to have been discriminated against argued that freedom to express their beliefs in public was absolute, whoever it offended. Is that what Christians are claiming? I don't think they're claiming that, are they?
Well, I would claim that. I mean, that's part of freedom of speech, isn't it? I mean, it's quite established part of freedom of speech. There's no right to not be offended.
No. Well, I wouldn't say that the freedom to express your belief in public is absolute. I think there are even in countries which promote freedom of speech, ostensibly, like the US, for example, there are still limits on freedom of speech. You can't promote a belief that will cause people to, incite people to immediate acts of violence, for example. So
no, I know, but we're not talking about that. I mean, yes, there are limits on freedom of speech. You can't shout fire in a crowded theatre. That you can't exhort people to violence or criminality. No, you can't. But there is no right not to be offended. So we're talking specifically about offence. There's again and again it's been found there's no right not to be offended. So you cannot. So being offended is not sufficient to stop freedom of speech. Otherwise, for obvious reasons.
I don't know.
For obvious reasons, because you could take offence at anything.
Yeah, but
there's no legal right for that. Who knows what people could take offence at?
It's an interesting question, though, isn't it? Because we did used to have blasphemy laws in this country, for example.
And, yeah, we don't anymore. But,
yeah, but is that a good thing?
Probably.
I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's a bad thing, personally. I've just decided, Tom, that I think we should bring back blasphemy laws. But all I'm saying is
we have new. Problem is, Jamie, we've got new blasphemy laws.
Yeah, well, we do, don't we? Yeah.
But they're just not written.
Yeah, which is worse, really, for them being unwritten. Anyway, that's a whole separate question. Sorry, I only just really thought about that. Carrying on. On the other, a chill fact. So this is, again, Reverend Dr. Martin Brown. Sorry, what was his name? Malcolm Brown. On the other, a chill factor was leading employers to regard any expression of religious belief as potentially problematic. Senior contacts in the legal profession told us of a judiciary increasingly frustrated with the way these cases were being argued in the courts, with the aggressive voices beginning to be seen as typically Christian. There may be a problem about expressing religious belief in public, but not exactly the one which some of the campaign groups describe. So this is... it's not an exercise in clear communication, is it? He's using a lot of passive sentences, which make you think, what is he actually saying here? So people in the judiciary frustrated with the way these... where they're saying that the Christians are being aggressive, and there are problems about expressing religious belief in public, but not in the way that, for example, Mrs. Higgs would say. Is that what he's saying? Any idea?
I suspect what he's saying is we worry about the church being associated with unfashionable causes.
It does sort of sound a bit like that, doesn't it?
It does sound like that. I mean, that's to me what it sounds like.
And that doesn't really excite our PR department.
Yeah. Just finish this quote off. People who make a mistake or act naively should be protected. Those who use their expressions of faith or opposition to faith to provoke an angry reaction, or who trample over the integrity of others, will see that their legal claims are likely to fail. We hope that the lazy assumption that religious belief is only truly authentic when it is strident and in your face may have been laid to rest. So there we go. So
unless, of course, it's to certain other political causes.
Yeah.
Then it can be as strident as it wants.
Yeah, well, then you
but
can
it makes a mockery of, say, Paul in Corinthians. You know, the cross is an offence to the Greeks and a stumbling block to Jews. You know, the message of Christianity is offensive to those who dwell in sin.
It's the other way around, isn't it, Tom?
Is it?
Isn't it an offence to Greeks and a stumbling block to Jews?
That's what I said.
Or maybe it's the other way around from that. I'm just trying to think, because the Greeks don't like it because it sounds illogical, and the Jews don't like it because they can't have their Messiah being crucified. That's the point. That's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this is basically saying we don't want to upset our Guardian reading friends.
Yeah. So he's a bit unhappy about all these Christians who are taking employment tribunals to court in order to protect their right to express the Christian faith.
Well, boy, they're not very excited about you lot either.
No, and
they're very underwhelmed.
And this level of unhappiness has caused him to release a statement which is entirely unreadable. But I mean, to be fair, we've only got this one that's been chopped up by the Telegraph, so maybe it's missing all the context that makes this into a brilliant piece of prose. But you know, maybe not. I just think I think that what he's saying effectively is that he doesn't want the Church of England or Christianity to be associated with these people, these rabble rousers, these offensive types who are prepared to say things that people don't like to hear, and when they then get fired, they have the audacity to take their firings to courts, which is upsetting the judiciary, who are finding this very upsetting because they have to sit there and listen and be judges of these people they don't really agree with, and what they have to do is actually listen to Christians say things that are outrageous, Jamie, like, you know, people with penises are men.
Willies.
Yeah, I mean, he's recommending, isn't he, essentially that the hierarchy of the church has a policy of washing its hands.
Wash those hands.
Yes.
Wash those hands. Yeah. Just let those people's jobs go. Don't speak up. If a teacher in a school says it's okay to be a cat, and it's a church school, just keep quiet about that.
Do you know? The next thing we'll see is the update to valuing God's children with an section on, you know, cats, and you know, if you really
furries,
if you want to be a cat, that should be respected.
Don't be exclusive of other animal choices. Animal gender.
They're all made in the image of God, apart from those who identify as non-human.
Yes, or climate.
Well, what about those?
The comment about the judiciary is farcical, isn't it? It's so low resolution. It's like, well, there have been reports, or we've been hearing, off the record by people in the judiciary that there is, frustration or something like that. I mean, that's not the way our legal system works, is it? Like, the law is supposed to be impartial, it's supposed to be fair, it's supposed to be applied equally to everyone. Who cares if some legal person has made some kind of comment to him? It doesn't characterize the judiciary and the whole of the English legal system, does it? It's like, you better stop doing this. You better stop bringing these cases to court. Otherwise, the judiciary is going to be annoyed with you. Like they're going to be ticked off. I mean, it's kind of a ridiculous comment, really. But there we go. We should move on, because there are a couple of stories I just wanted to do before we run out of our time. Is that all right? Did you want to?
Yeah, no, move on. Yeah.
Just a couple of things. I don't know if there's very much to say about this, really, but I did see a really sad article about the persecution of Christians in Nigeria. I've got an article here from Crux, which is a Catholic publication. Reports claim 700 Christians killed as farewell gift to Nigeria's ex-president. A leading Nigerian human rights organization has published a report claiming that largely Muslim Fulani herdsmen killed about 700 Christians in May as farewell gifts to former President Muhammadu Buhari, who just handed power over to President Bola Tinubu. The Nigerian radical Islamic leaders who mark the end of their civilian office tenures on 29th of May will wish farewell by jihadist Fulani herdsmen who mark the end of their office tenures by slaughtering not less than 700 defenseless Christians in May, states this report. The report details alleged Christian killings in several states, noting that Plateau State donated 350 Christian lives, Benue 190, Kaduna 100, Nasarawa 62, Niger 50, and it goes on like that. Not less than 1,100 defenseless Christians were hacked to death by Nigerian government-backed Islamic jihadis in the past 60 days, between 12th of April and 12th of June, which averages about 17 Christian deaths a day. And it goes on like this. I mean, I'll put it in the show notes, but I just think this kind of thing, it's important to talk about this, because Christians are persecuted around the world, and they are martyred for their faith, and particularly so apparently in Nigeria. We should remember this. Of course, this is never going to be mentioned by the media in our country, because it wants to propagate the kind of narrative that the Reverend Dr. Malcolm Brown is such a fan of, but this is a reality.
Those black lives don't matter.
Yeah, they don't matter, do they? Those black Christian lives don't matter in Nigeria. So that's really sad, and we should pray for the church in Nigeria, which is being persecuted and at risk. Can you imagine? I mean, can you imagine? So there's that. And then the other thing I just want to talk about, this was last week, but we were away, is this thing about this woman who was sent to jail. I think she has been sent to jail, hasn't she? Because she aborted her child at 32 weeks old. I thought it was particularly interesting that Alison Pearson, the Telegraph journalist, wrote a piece about this. Now, I don't know whether you chaps have more details on the story, but so it was the British Pregnancy Advisory Service sent her some. Is it that they sent her the abortion pills in the post?
Yeah, so it's a very sad background, really, because I mean, it wasn't possible to do abortions at home until the lockdown, and then they successfully campaigned just so that the killing of children could continue unabated by lockdown, to have this at-home abortion pills, but only if you're under 10 weeks pregnant. But it was laughably easy to bypass that. There was no checks and balances at all. There's no requirement for ultrasounds. There's no even requirement. I mean, people did it under false names, etc. So this then was continued after lockdown. So it became a sort of de facto, having been introduced. It continued. So it was an attempt. There were strong attempts by some Christian charities to resist this, but unfortunately, it's happened, and this is exactly what people said would happen.
Thanks, Matt Hancock.
Yeah. So she lied to BPAS and gave them the impression she was 7 weeks pregnant. So you couldn't have them if you're over 10 weeks pregnant. But she was actually 32 weeks pregnant or something like that.
We're talking viable child,
Yeah, my daughter was born Pram at 32 weeks.
Yeah.
Finished her GCSEs.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are countless in Alison Pearson's article. She quotes many tweets of people saying very, very similar things to that. And her article is entitled, "If you choose to abort your baby at 32 weeks, jail is exactly where you belong. A woman's reproductive rights do not include stopping the heart of a baby that can live outside its mother's body." So if anyone has ever seen a picture of a 32-year-old baby, it doesn't really look that much different from a baby that's been born at 40 weeks or around that. And it's sort of unbelievable that someone could do something like this. I think the impression I get is that she moved in with a man who wasn't the father of the child. And I assume that was the motive in her wanting to destroy this child. And there have been calls by many people, Labour and people on the left, to say that this is actually wrong, that she's been sent to prison, and that we need to update the law so this kind of thing doesn't happen. I just wanted to, and Alison is pushing back against that. I just wanted to read a bit of what she said, where I think is the real weakness in what she says. So she writes, "In case you're wondering, I fully support abortion within the legal limit, because insisting women should have babies they don't want or can't provide for is not humane to mother or child. Bringing up a baby that you want is tough enough, but the British 24 limit is getting harder and harder to defend as advances in medical science mean fetuses can survive earlier outside the womb." So I think that really contradicts what she said in the rest of the article, because essentially what she's saying in the rest of the article is that this child had a right to life, and that the child should be thought about, and the child has rights, and so on and so forth. But what she's saying here is that abortion, I mean, to me, it's a confused viewpoint, because she's saying that abortion is an acceptable thing to do as long as the child is not viable, and that it's not humane to have a child. It's not humane for a woman to have a child that she doesn't want, as long as it's not viable. Now, to me, that's just a completely arbitrary distinction, and it just makes absolutely no sense to me. The thing about the heart beating, I haven't actually looked this up, but she says, you shouldn't stop a heart beating, but don't babies' hearts beat from quite an early stage. I mean, I think it's like a matter of weeks. I'll look it up in a second.
It's very early. You can see a heartbeat, I think, on a 10-week scan.
Is it? Yeah. I'll look it up. But it's just, to me, this idea of it being viable. Why does a child accrue rights when it's viable? I mean, babies that are born are not viable in the sense that they need constant care and supervision for years, right? And especially when they're just born, they need to be fed. They can't sleep. They can't walk. Obviously, they can't talk. They can't do anything. And
hence the practice in Rome, wasn't it, of infanticide? Yeah. But the father of the house would decide from whichever wife had procured a child whether or not he recognized that child as a potential member of his household, and if he didn't, they were put out to the hills to die.
It's 5 to 6 weeks that a baby's heart starts beating. So when she says a woman's reproductive rights do not include stopping the heart of a baby that can live outside of its mother's body, you're stopping a heartbeat for 30 weeks prior to the time at which this woman killed her child. And I just think, I mean, I don't know whether Alison would ever listen to this podcast or be interested in what we have to say, but I just think, you just need to embrace the reality that abortion is wrong and that children have a right to life from the time they're conceived, and that there's no limit, which is not totally arbitrary. That's what I would want to say to her. Just wake up. You're saying all the right things, but don't support abortion within the legal limit, because the legal limit is nonsense. It doesn't make any sense, and it's completely inhumane. That's my view, man.
I believe she does listen to the podcast. No, she's printed last year that we were one of her favourites.
Really? Is that true? Wow. Well, maybe she's listening. And if
Hi, Alison. Yeah.
Go on, Tom. You Karen.
I said hi, Alison. I think you're absolutely right, Jamie. It's incoherent. I remember. Do you remember there was some work done by some philosophers in Oxford, I think, saying, arguing that effectively you can justify infanticide by which we said already, by the same logic criteria that you can justify abortion. And it's not as if there are not plenty of adoption charities, of other ways of making sure that the babies can have a good start to life, even if they're, quote, unwanted, unquote. And that's why we have them, and that's that's part of the support that Christianity has always offered. Not always in the best way, maybe, but it's something that's always been a response. Adoption charities and making sure that the babies are cared for. Yeah. I mean, it's also pointed out, I think it was in Unheard when I was reading about this, or possibly in The Critic, that if she hadn't kept pleading not guilty, the chances are that this woman would have only got a suspended sentence. She wouldn't have had jail time. It's only because she kept pleading not guilty that she's got jail time.
I think the fact that we've had these kind of these outcries, how can a woman be sent to jail for doing this? I think it shows how desensitized we've become to what's actually going on.
Yeah.
If you kill a 32-week-old, was it 32 weeks or was it? I think it was 32 weeks.
32.
If you kill a 32-week-old child, the violence that has to be done to that child, which is a unambiguously living, breathing, sentient human being in its most in its earliest, most vulnerable stages, is unconscionable. And so you have to ask yourself, is that not legitimately thought of as a criminal act that deserves retribution and, if possible, rehabilitation? What else could qualify for such a description, if not killing a child of that age? I can't understand. But I think the reason is because people have been so desensitized, because this practice has been going on now for decades legally. Millions and millions of children have been destroyed as a result of it, and it's like we're morally numb to the reality of what's actually going on. And so we say, it's terrible.
My suspicion is that if we have a Labour government, that in essence this will all be decriminalised. That the momentum, sadly, on that side of Parliament is for this, and that there will be some kind of review. And I suspect on the back of this, we'll probably also have a Canadian-style euthanasia system introduced.
I think you could be right.
I hope you're not right, but I fear you are. And of course, what will the church say? Virtually nothing, one suspects.
Nothing.
I mean, that was a whole other question, isn't it? Of what, if anything, can be done about the possibility of Labour getting in and doing things like this. But I think the central point that I think really needs to be emphasised here is that all of these criteria, viability, having certain limits where, at which point a child has personhood and protected status and all this kind of stuff. None of this works. All of this is completely arbitrary, and you can just remove it, and the logic of abortion remains untouched. The only thing that can safeguard the life of children within the womb at any age is to insist that children within the womb are made in the image of God. They're human beings, and they should not be killed by abortion. And there's just have a complete zero tolerance policy on any other view. And there may be a small grey area where you say, well, what about in certain cases, if the pregnancy of the child threatens the life of the mother? That may be a legitimate question, but it does not justify what's going on. Even if you think that is an acceptable thing to do, that does not justify what's going on, because none of these are about that. It's just about people aborting children, destroying children because they don't want them. And
you can see the connection, can't you, to the previous conversation that we've had on gender and reality, that if in my head I can decide what I am, then I can likewise do the same to you.
Yeah.
If I want you to identify as basically being a fleshy meat product, or I want to dehumanize you, It's easy. If the whole of reality is just something that I decide in my head, then anything can be justified. It is the culture of death. It is what was it? The Ratzinger quote: "The dictatorship of relativism. My truth is my truth, and I've set the world up in this way. Yeah. Who are you to say that it's any different?"
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one of the best analogies I've ever heard in this, which I think I don't know whether he made it up, but it was our friend Mike Tom who I first heard this from. He said, if you had a building that was scheduled for demolition, and you weren't sure whether there was a person inside of it, you would not just say, well, there probably isn't someone in there, let's go ahead and demolish the building. Because you would want to find out for sure that there was no one in that building before you demolished it. So you'd have to check. And if you weren't sure, you just wouldn't demolish it because you don't want to kill a person. And applying that by analogy to the situation with abortion, if you're unsure that what you're doing, I just slipped on my chair, sorry. If you're unsure that the thing that's in the womb, if you're not unsure of its status, whether it's a child or not, whether it's a human being, you should apply the same logic. You should say, well, I'm not sure whether that's a human being. So to err on the side of caution, I won't legalize it up to 24 weeks and have millions and millions and millions of them destroyed, because I could be destroying millions and millions and millions of children. So you would logically, and ethically, you would err on the side of caution. But of course, we don't do that. We just say, well, they can't be children. They can't be. It can't be the case. Just can't be, because they're not viable, or for some other arbitrary criteria.
Well, I suspect because then if you change your mind now, you would come under the crushing guilt of having enabled as a society and as individuals the deaths of millions. How many Mozarts have we killed? That's what I always wonder.
I don't know, but probably it's not many Mozarts, is it? Because Mozart was probably like a one in a billion, wasn't he? I think.
And one in a billion, we're getting quite close to coming close to at least one. You know?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how highly you rate Mozart.
Well, I know, but that's the point, isn't it? You know, how many great geniuses? Probably quite a few.
Yeah.
Actually, how many people who have made a real difference to this world?
But do you not think, Tom? It's not even a question of whether or not somebody was going to be a genius or
no, absolutely not. But it's just
have a right to live. And
absolutely. But it's just a sort of thought that comes into my head sometimes. You know,
yeah, I've heard a sort of an allegory on the lines of someone pleading to the Almighty, why is there cancer? And getting the divine response, you were sent the genius who cured it, but he was aborted.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So, Alison, please come to our side on this, because you're very, very close to being correct in everything you say. But the obvious implication is to be pro-life. That's the obvious implication of what you're saying. If you want to use that American phrase, I don't mind applying it to myself at all. Chaps, we've spoken about, I think, probably everything we're going to speak about today. So I'm just going to do a little plug to support the podcast, and then we'll finish up. But just to say, if you've made it this far in the podcast, you must enjoy it. So please do consider supporting us. Now, I've just taken a part-time vicaring job, partly so I can work on this podcast more. So I am now highly reliant on this income. So please do support this podcast. We need it not just for my income, but also for our overheads, which includes our server costs and our equipment and everything like that. It's really, really important that we're supported by our listeners. We don't have any adverts on the show. We're not working for any kind of corporation. We're not selling you things. We're just entirely supported by our listeners. So please do consider supporting us. You can do that on Patreon, which you can find on our website, revs.com, and just click on the big red button. On Patreon, you can support us monthly for as little as £1.50 per month, plus VAT in the UK. And you get the episodes a little bit early, and you get our bonus audio podcast, which is called Uncollared, where we just chat about various really, really interesting and often funny things. That's just a little extra that everyone who supports us on Patreon gets. So please go to patreon.com and click on the red button and support us £1.50 a month or more if you'd like to. And we do appreciate it when people give us more than that because it helps us so much. Or you can leave us a little message on Buy Me a Coffee and leave a donation on there. It's a virtual coffee. It's not a real coffee. It's just a way of making a donation online. So again, go on patreon.com and click on the yellow button, Buy Me a Coffee, and we will see you there. Also, you can join us on Telegram. I love our Telegram channel. Telegram is my favorite social media because it allows me to be so self-indulgent. Go to t.me/irreverendpod and join us on Telegram. Send us an email, reverendpod@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter @irreverendpod, etc., etc. But yes, it'd be great if you could support us in some way. Chaps, that's the end of my notices. Thanks so much for the conversation. Really enjoyed it today. Does someone want to do a little prayer? Has anyone got something they can share with us?
Bear me a sec. I'm just going to get this coming Sunday's collect.
Ah, yes.
Well, this is appropriate, I think. Let us pray. Almighty God, you have broken the tyranny of sin and sent the Spirit of your Son into our hearts, whereby we call you Father. Give us grace to dedicate our freedom to your service, that we and all creation may be brought to the glorious liberty of the children of God. We make this prayer through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Daniel.
Tyranny of sin needs to be broken.
And a reference to Romans 8 there as well, which Tom mentioned earlier, I believe. So very good. All right, chaps. Well, thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for listening. And we still don't have a sign-off line, which we're waiting for. So somebody needs to think of something, a cool thing we can say at the end, like nice to see you nice, or something like that.
Just bless you all.
Bless you.
Just do it.
Yeah, excellent. All right, guys. Thank you. See you again soon.